In this video, I'm going to explain how to add with positive and negative numbers. The most basic idea of addition that you need to have is that it's about combination. And this is going to get more complicated, but to start with, thinking about 3 plus 4. Well, if we really try to unpack it, when we think about what's being combined, we have 3 of something, and we're adding 4 more. And when we want to think of how many do we have in total, well, we just add them all together by combining them. And so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 3 plus 4 is equal to 7. Well, you're probably familiar with that. And a more complicated idea that we can throw in to addition is the idea of what happens with opposites. We like to say that opposites cancel each other out. So for example, if you have, let's say, a positive counter and a negative, well, they cancel each other out. They make 0. We can use this idea in addition with our idea of addition means combining to try and understand how to add positive and negative numbers. So let's say you were trying to add 4 and negative 6. Well, 4 is positive and 6 is negative. So let's combine 4 positives and 6 negative. Since a positive and a negative cancel each other out, these two cancel each other out. And so do these, so do these. And so what we're left with is a bunch of 0 pairs, we would call them. That's a 0 pair, and that's a 0 pair. All these pairs of things that add up to 0, but also 2 negatives by themselves. And so when we're done combining our 4 positives and our 6 negatives and canceling out the opposites, we end with 2 negatives. So the answer is negative 2. Let's try another example. What if we were to add negative 5 plus negative 12? Well, we'd start combining our 5 negatives from negative 5 with 12 negatives from negative 12. 10, 11, 12. But since there's nothing that cancels out, we don't have any pairs that make 0 here, negative 5 and negative 12 just means that we have 17 negatives. And so negative 5 combined with negative 12, or added to negative 12, is just negative 17. One more example, negative 4 plus 6. To add negative 4 and positive 6, you start with 4 negatives, and then combine it with 6 positives. Well, this gives us 4 pairs that cancel each other out of a positive and negative, and 2 positives left over. So the answer is positive 2. So I've been using this strategy of counters to try and help you visualize what's happening when we're adding positives and negatives. Now I want you to try and take what we've learned from the canceling and apply it to try and form some rules about how do we add when we have numbers that have the same sign. Well, when our terms have the same sign, like 2 positives, 3 plus 4, we get 7, or 2 negatives, negative 2 plus negative 3, we don't have anything to cancel out. And so in both cases, we get an answer that's bigger than either of the other numbers, and it has the same sign, because if we started with 2 negatives and we get 3 more negatives, well, then we have 5 negatives in total. A rule that we can remember for adding with the same sign is simply add the numbers and then take your answer and keep the sign, which means if the 2 numbers were positive, keep it positive. in the answer. If the two numbers were negative, keep the answer negative. What about when we add numbers that have a different sign? Well, this is when we were having to cancel. If I had 2 plus -3, then I'm picturing 2 positives and 3 negatives, and there's some canceling that happens. So I get -1. Or likewise, if I had 5 negatives and 9 positives, I'd be picturing my 5 negatives and 9 positives. And the canceling would leave me with 4 positives. Well, what we're really doing when we add numbers with different signs is we're subtracting. I had 3 negatives and 2 positives canceled out, 2 of the negatives, and I ended up with 1 negative. Over here I had 9 positives, which was the bigger number, and 5 of them were taken away by negatives. I'm left with 4 positives. Well, our rules for adding with different signs are basically, we start out by subtracting. And we subtract numbers big. We start with the bigger number, and we take away the smaller number. The second thing we do, once we've done that, is we have to decide what sign the number should have. What sign should the answer be? Should this be +1 or -1? Should this be +4 or -4? And the easiest way to figure out where the sign comes from is to just look at the two numbers you added and to take the sign from the bigger number. So in this case, the bigger number was 3 and it was negative, so our answer is going to be negative. Since the bigger number here is positive, then the answer is going to be positive. The way we describe that is we just say, keep the sign from the bigger number. Keep sign. Whoops, sorry, not keep the sign, but rather sign from the greater number. I'll just say sign from greater. Okay, if you can use these two rules, then you can add numbers, any two numbers that have the same sign or different signs. Let's see a couple examples. To use these rules to add -9 and -8, since both numbers are negative, we say they have the same sign. So we simply add the numbers together. 8 plus 9 is 17. And we keep the sign that the numbers had. So since the numbers were negative, we get -17 as our answer. In this example, we have two numbers with different signs, a positive and a negative. And since the signs are different, I'm going to subtract, put the bigger number on top, 7 minus 4. In this step, I don't really care about the sign. I didn't write -7. I'm just thinking of the 7 counters that are negative, and the 4 positive counters, and the 4 are going to cancel out 7 of the negatives. So I end with 3. And now, after I've subtracted, I need to take the sign from the greater number. So since 7 is the greater, I take the sign, which is negative, and I use that with my answer. I have -3 for the answer. In this case, -3 plus 8, well, again, the signs are different. I have a negative and a positive, so I'm going to subtract. Put the bigger number on top when I subtract. 8 take away 3 is 5. And to figure out if the answer is positive or negative, I just look to the numbers. Since 8 is bigger, and then I take the sign from 8. So this 8 is positive, the answer is positive. 5 is the answer. That's how we add numbers with different signs, or the same signs. We just need to remember these two rules, and we should be able to add any kinds of numbers that we come to. Good luck.